Okay, so this actually is a follow-up video. I'll explain the history of the original video first. I've been inspired to do this because the first video I did 3 years ago, when Rihanna and Chris Brown split up because he'd punched the fuck out of her and bitten her, and now it looks like they're getting back together. So it inspires a lot of debate as to, you know, why would she do that? Why would somebody who's that beautiful, that desired, that successful, that intelligent, that wealthy go back with somebody like that? And the original video was called "Why Do Women Get Back with Abusive Men?" Let me talk about trauma bonding for a moment first. Trauma bonding simply means that if two people have shared a highly emotional experience together, it gives them a unique bond and perhaps even a false sense of a depth of bond and a false sense of shared history. The more intense an experience is, the more deeply it could be said to burn into a person's unconscious. So if you compare a pleasant evening out between a nice couple, where they go and they have a nice meal and then they go to the cinema and they come back and they have quiet but, you know, nice sex for 15-20 minutes and then, you know, go to sleep in each other's arms. That's all very nice and it's very lovely. Whereas if you compare that to going out, getting drunk, snorting coke, seeing your girlfriend dancing with another man, so the young couple's there together, the guy sees the girl dancing with another man, because he's a nutcase, he flips out and starts screaming at her. They have a big scene in the club, he gets tossed out of the club by the doorman, the police are called, he's fighting with guys outside, the girlfriend's screaming, then he takes her home and they have a screaming row and he punches her a few times, and then they're both still drunk and high. And I'm not saying that Rihanna and Chris Brown were, I'm giving you an example of how trauma bonding works and the intensity of emotional experience, and then they have rabid, animalistic sex because they're in this highly emotional, highly vulnerable, very, very raw state. And that is trauma bonding. The original term trauma bonding, I came across it not through psychology, though I am a psychologist. I came across it during my period as a paranoid conspiracy theorist, and I read about it in relation to mind control in terms of psyops and Satanism, and I'm using these inverted commas because I am not sure or convinced at all that satanic cults exist in quite the way that they are portrayed to in any real sense. Also, this whole thing about psyops and people, innocent civilians, being dragged off the streets and then their minds broken so that they could become mind-controlled assassins. I also would take a lot of that stuff with a fairly large pinch of salt, but keep an open mind. As always, keep an open and critical, an open yet critical mind. And trauma bonding in that sense, as I first came across it, was they were saying, well, look, if you want to mind control somebody, you get them as a child, and they alleged in this piece that I was reading, this is what satanic mind control cults associated with the CIA would do, raise his eyebrow. And it's quite easy to imagine is if you take a child and you slap them around and shout at them and scream at them so that they're frightened, you leave them poorly nourished so that they're a little bit dazed and confused, and then you lock them in a cupboard, a dark cupboard for 8 hours, which is an intensely frightening experience. You are the abuser if you did that. That in the child's mind they would associate your voice and the sight of your face to feelings of pain and suffering, and that should create resentment. However, if you come back to the child after 8 hours of isolation in a dark cupboard and release the child from the dark cupboard and then feed the child and speak nicely to the child, you are then also the rescuer. So then the child has intense feelings of gratitude and of warmth and of love towards the person who is abusing them. That's trauma bonding. Where else do you see it? I think where it was fictionalized very nicely and very cleanly was in George Orwell's 1984, where the main character, who I can't even remember if he has a name in the book or not, if he's named or not, but anyway, the main character, the main protagonist, is being tortured by, well, in the film, the main character is played by John Hurt, and the torturer is Richard Burton. And they very nicely, both in the film and in the book, convey this sense of almost like a weird love that develops between the tortured for the torturer, when the torture is framed as being education. I'm doing this for your own good. This is the kind of thing an abuser will say to the abused. I'm doing this to teach you a lesson. I'm doing this to drive the devil out of you, if it has a religious context. And many religions around the world will do that. There was a death in the UK, in London, not that long ago, of people who drowned, not their own children, they were children that they were left to look after. After days of beating them and torturing them, they eventually drowned them, one of the kids, in the bath, believing that they were possessed by evil spirits, and that all that they innocently claimed, all we were trying to do is drive the evil spirits out, and they're still going to jail, and rightly so. So that's trauma bonding. So you need to understand and have compassion for people when they behave in this. For family members, and I have direct experience of this, both sides of the fence. When I originally did the original video, I was in a emotionally abusive relationship, but I didn't really realise it until months went by after the video, and it became a source of irony to me that over the years people have emailed me saying, "That's a great video on how to get back with abusive women. Please tell us more about trauma bonding." And I was like, I was actually, when I did that video, I was going through it but didn't know. So this has become, I don't want this to be a gender specific thing, this tends to be a thing that men, evil men, do to women, innocent women, and I don't want to feed into that discourse. I don't want to feed into that paradigm because it's fallacious and it's not helpful. Women are just as capable of being abusive, though usually the abuse is psychological and emotional rather than physical, but we all use the weapons that we have available to us, do we not? Certainly whether it's a man doing it to a woman or a woman doing it to a woman. I've got mates in 2 cases I can think of since I made that last video of female friends who are in lesbian relationships where they were being abused by their female partners, but their female partners were adopting the role of the male and were knocking them around and punching them. And it's very, very frustrating as a friend or family member to stand outside of that and say, why are you being such a dick? Why don't you just leave them? So it's about having that compassion. Trauma bonding is only one element of it. Let me wind the clock back again. One of the things that motivated the creation of the first video, called Why Do Women Get Back with Abusive Men, is Rihanna and Chris Brown had this situation, had this bus stop, and Larry King was talking about domestic violence on his show on CNN, and I was watching it, and they brought a woman in who ran the main charity for battered women in America, who would actually look after battered women, protect battered women, give them somewhere to stay, give them legal advice and all the rest of it. And Larry King, or one of the other guests, just asked a simple question to this woman who they assumed was an expert on the psychology of abusive relationships and domestic violence. Why do women stay with abusive men? And she didn't know. She stuttered, and I was watching this and I was like, maybe it's not, to me, I know how and why these things happen, but it's not common knowledge. I don't think people commonly understand why it happens, and very frequently when you try and talk about this type of stuff on YouTube, you get YouTube comments like, well, women are just dumb. Women aren't that bright, they lack an ability to think critically and all the rest of it. And I'm like, well, hang on a second, speaking as a man who had the degree in psychology, who was a master practitioner of NLP, and generally speaking is generally quite a switched on sort of character, I got suckered into an emotionally abusive relationship with a narcissist and literally couldn't see the wood for the trees. So I really doubt that intelligence is a factor. I know plenty of intelligent, well-grounded, switched on people, both male and female, who have been in and are still in abusive relationships in one form or another. Now, the reasoning why people stay in abusive relationships is down to a lot of different things, and it's a lot simpler and perhaps a lot crueler than we would like to think. But trauma bonding certainly is a factor, and it's something that should be understood and is worth talking about. So just to recap, so you walk away from this video feeling like, hey, I now know what one of the reasons is. One of the reasons is trauma bonding. Trauma bonding is all about an intensely emotional shared experience. So if you have any intensely emotional shared, like a near-death experience with somebody, you will find yourself instinctively and naturally and unconsciously bonding to them. In the same way, in abusive relationships, Stockholm syndrome, as it's sometimes called, the bond that develops between the kidnapper and the kidnapped, and the torturer and the tortured, the victim, especially when the abuse and the torture is framed as re-education. You have impure thoughts inside of you, we need to burn them out with you, and that kind of thing. So that is trauma bonding. There are other factors why people get back into and stay in abusive relationships, like simple things like love. You may have heard of it, but you know, it's pretty addictive. And sex. Very often abusive relationships tend to be a lot more sexually intense, and that sex can be extremely addictive because it's very physically and psychologically gratifying, but we'll get into that in the next couple of videos. Hope you enjoyed that. Please leave a comment, like it, favourite it, and all the rest of it. And if I didn't cover anything properly or you got any other questions, then do feel free to ask. Okay. Oh, if you want to book a session with me, with the Spartan Life Coach, just go to the website and follow the instructions there. And it's all done via Skype. So you need to download Skype, which is a free service. Just go to skype.com, download Skype. If you've got an internet connection, then we can talk face to face, and any payments are done through PayPal. So it's very simple and it's very cheap compared to other life coaches as well. Okay, guys, that's all for today. Thank you very much.